Back a year ago.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Beer Bound Podcast. Very excited to be joined by Stephanie Grant. Stephanie is an Atlanta-based writer and content creator who uses her talents to help breweries and restaurants shine on the internet. In 2020, she was a recipient of the Diversity in Beer Writing Grant from the North American Guild of Beer Writers and was recognized in Imbibe's 75 People to Watch in 2021. In her spare time, Stephanie's in the kitchen passionately experimenting with food and beer pairings. Gotta love it. So without further ado, we welcome Stephanie to the Beer Bound Podcast. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Maybe I gave a very short introduction, Stephanie. Can you give us maybe a little bit more about who you are, your connection with beer, and the great state of Georgia?
Sure. So I was born and raised here in Atlanta. It is currently extremely hot here, but don't ever call it Hotlanta. We do not like that at all. I got into beer. I've been drinking craft beer for probably 11 years now. And I started with an Allagash White. I actually went to my fridge today to find one, and I didn't have one, and I panicked. I love that beer. It's so good. It's just one of those good ones to have in the fridge at all times. So I got into beer or craft beer about 11 years ago. I tried to kind of push it off of my husband, like that was his hobby, but I realized that my passion for it was way greater than his. And so I paired my love of writing with beer and became a beer writer, journalist, whatever you want to call it. In 2017, I believe I published my first article, and I've just been going since. And I love covering stories that focus on Black culture, Black food. I have a newsletter called The Share where I share the stories of beer, cocktails, and food and the Black hands that make them. And I have just been loving it. I also work for myself as a content creator. And as you mentioned in my bio, I work for people in the food and bev industry, helping them out with content, whether that's something that's written, video reels, are super hot right now, and any photography. So that's my thing.
Very cool. And Stephanie, do you have a background in writing at all before touching on beer specifically? Is that a bit of your background? Yes. Before 2017?
Yes. So I like to tell people I've been writing since I could hold a crayon in my hand. When I look back on my childhood, like I was creating stories and stapling pieces of paper together to make a book since I was a little girl. But then when I went to college, I decided I wanted to do pre-med. But that first I think it was a chemistry class or a physics class. And I was like, oh no, this is not for me. And I was like, I just want a job where I can read all day. And I think the counselor, she was like, oh, well, what about, there was a bunch of different writing degrees. And so I went into technical writing. Which is not at all what I do now, but it's something I occasionally pull out my tool belt. But I really love storytelling. I love storytelling, and that's reflected in what I was doing as a kid, telling stories all over the place. And I love retelling stories to make them funny. It's just my thing.
What do you think, Stephanie? What do you think it is about stories that interests you so much? I read, I'll talk more about this in a bit, but I read something on your website recently, a story you posted, I think maybe your most recent one, about you and your grandmother, and just your storytelling ability. It's very good. It was a very short story, but that could have been a whole novel just expressed, like how much. It was just very profound, very deep. What is it about stories that you find particularly interesting, or that you need to express that? Where does that come from?
I don't know where that comes from. So there's a word, and in and I don't want to say it just in African culture, but I'm sure it's specific to a country, but I don't know that right now. But it's griot, and that is griots used to tell the stories of the community, and they would pass down stories, and that was the way they did it before, not necessarily before written things were written down, but I feel like that, like maybe my ancestors were griots, and I just like naturally, there's something I was actually talking to my husband earlier today about how um the uncle nearest his great granddaughter, who is now taken up his blending of whiskeys, how she started doing it in 2019, and she has won awards already. And this wasn't something that she did before. It's 20, like it's been three or 4 years, and she's already won awards for this thing. And I was like, that just shows you that that was just in her blood. And so I think it's similar to that, because I don't know of anyone in my family who writes, but I'm sure down the line, like it's just that. But I I love, I just love a story. I love even a bad story. Like I was just watching something bad on Netflix earlier, and I was like, this is a great story. I love it. It's about vampires and vampire hunters. Like it's crazy, but I just love the plot, the mystery of it all. I love the journey. It's the middle part that gets me. Like it's not the beginning sucks you in, and that middle part just like keeps you there, right? And then you get to the end, and if it's a good ending, you're satisfied with completing the story. But I don't know, I just love all aspects of it. I love telling stories, and I love listening to stories and reading stories. I've never really thought about why, but it's just something I've always loved to do.
Nowadays, more than ever, maybe it's interesting we have such a different realm of mediums to tell stories. You're obviously deep in the webs of content creation. So like you mentioned, short video, we're all movie directors now, essentially.
Yes.
In our pockets, we all have probably a better cameras than we had in Hollywood 25 or 30 years ago. So we can do so much. Is writing still the most impactful thing to you? Is that really what you enjoy doing, or other content creation, other varieties, other mediums of storytelling or creation, is that just as interesting or maybe more interesting to you?
So I have been having this urge to kind of get away from a computer screen. And so filming a reel or taking photos has been something that I've been really enjoying. Particularly this week, I've been focusing on that a lot. I have some projects that are due, and I've been working on those things. And it's been great to get away from the computer. I spent most of my day in the kitchen creating content. It was great. But there was a moment today where I had a thought, and I just started writing. And I was like, God, I love this. I love it. I love putting those words together and creating a picture, drawing a narrative. My sister, she's really good at painting and drawing. And I've always envied her skills. But when I think about it, I can do the same things just with words. And I don't know, there's just something so beautiful to me about creating, and it doesn't really matter what the medium is. It's just taking something, putting things together and making something that really brings me joy. And like, I've always been the photographer, the family photographer. Always. I had a disposable camera when I was little and would take pictures all the time, would beg my mom to go get them developed. I think that I'm just a creator at heart, and it just comes out in these different ways. And I don't know if I could pick one, but I guess I would pick writing. Writing has been there for me in times when life was hard and I needed to write down my thoughts, and I've journaled all my life. It's been my companion. So I would pick writing.
Not a bad choice. I read some of your stuff Stephanie, not enough, but I know that you are a good storyteller. So can you maybe start us off with a little bit of information on your city, on Atlanta, Georgia, just your interest of this particular city in the US, maybe its connection to beer, to craft beer. Is it a great city for craft beer? Just elaborate us just maybe on our listeners who maybe have never been to Atlanta, just on the city itself, as well as its connection to beer.
Yeah, so Atlanta is a special place. And I'm not just saying that because I was born and raised here. I love this city so much, and people who have come to the city to visit understand how special it is, especially for Black people. There's a huge Black population here, and when you look at craft beer, there's a huge Black craft beer population here, and it's so great. I wrote a piece, it's called Drinking While Black. I can't remember the full title, but if you go to Good Beer Hunting, Drinking While Black, and I was talking about how I visited Asheville and in the comparison of Atlanta and how starkly white it was. And it was like almost like a culture shock, even though that was my second trip to Asheville. It was my second trip. But I realized like I had been adopted into this community. I mean, it kind of grew up around me because I remember, just to tell you about the Atlanta craft beer scene, the South loves to really restrict alcohol. The Bible Belt, if you've heard that term, it is not a good belt. It is a constricting belt that you are happy to take off at the end of the day.
All right, that's very good.
And we had some laws on the books that really restricted breweries and the growth of breweries. I remember we had probably 3 breweries back when I started drinking craft beer. And now I can't even tell you how many there are because I forgot when the law was put into place, but it's SB 85. And when that law went into place, it allowed breweries to sell on premise because they weren't allowed to do that. We had to purchase tours to drink samples of beer. It was wild. It was very cheap way to drink a lot of beer, though. I will tell you that. And a lot of us sometimes miss it, but I do appreciate the fact that we have this new law that has allowed these breweries to prosper here. So a few years ago, I would have said, no, it's not a great place for craft beer. I would travel a ton to go out and see what other states were doing. But now there's so many great breweries here. And so going back to the Black beer community here, I remember when I first started drinking, just like there were a few breweries, there were just a few Black women. I would be like, oh, hey, Jen, there you are. Like we all knew each other. But now it's just grown and it's so beautiful to see. I don't have to walk into a brewery anymore and be like the only Black person there. It's been great. So let's see, what else can I tell you about Atlanta? It's hot. It's so hot right now. Like, you won't be able to probably hear this, but it's starting to rain, and I can't tell you how happy I am about that. It's probably still going to be 90 degrees tomorrow, but you know, it's I guess I don't want to say the burden of living here. It's a great place to live. It's warm most of the time. We do get a winter occasionally. The springs are rough because the pollen. We have a lot of trees here. I think one of our nicknames is the city amongst the trees. And I love the trees. They're so beautiful, so mature. I live amongst a bunch of mature trees, which is beautiful because usually these subdivisions, no shade to anyone who lives in a subdivision, but they strip all the trees out. Anyway, this is not a tree podcast, but
I think of like peach trees. I think of when I think of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's crazy. I don't think I've ever seen a person, even though you would think the hidden secret I've heard is that Georgia's not actually a great producer of peaches.
It's a myth.
I've heard that.
I believe
That
it.
South Carolina actually is. I haven't fact checked it, so whoever's listening wants to fact check it, let me know.
No, that's Stephanie. I
I
believe
know
you.
it's a dirty little secret, but we do have good peaches here.
Mhm.
Actually, it's peach season, and I need to get some.
Yeah,
They're
definitely in this hot weather. That sounds great.
yes, the kind of peaches that you bite into them and the juices just run down your face. You eat them on the porch. That's the only way to do it.
Well, I think it's interesting. Obviously, your perspective is worth a lot for this, Stephanie, in terms of craft beer. I mean, and we've spoken with, I mean, we're up here in Canada. It's a little bit different, but not really. We've spoken with folks all over the United States, and craft beer sometimes it's gotten maybe a reputation for maybe being not the most welcome community for minorities, for people of color, for women. There's been lots of stories and lots of commentary saying that. It's interesting to hear you say that things are changing. Would you say that that's maybe more of an Atlanta specific thing, or maybe with your connections across the country, do you see the craft beer community as becoming a more welcome space to folks of every variety?
Oh, I don't know. Like I said, Atlanta is special. So, and Atlanta's not without its issues. I mean, we are in the South. There's very, how do you say, old ideas about people that still exist amongst people who live here. So I feel comfortable here, but there are probably breweries in the state of Georgia I wouldn't necessarily like feel super comfortable at. Yeah, there's actually one I visited north of the city that I was like, oh, I'm not coming back here. And it was not necessarily something someone did anything. It was just a vibe. It just felt not super welcoming. So I think that still exists. It's not the issues that exist in the beer community are representative of what's happening in this country. And if you look at the country as a whole and you still see those issues, then those issues definitely are still in beer. And I think it's just gonna take time, like maybe decades, for that to change. It's just not something that's, we're the fact that we're still dealing with racism almost a century after not being enslaved is like, that just shows you this is not something that's just going to automatically go away. And yes, it's a beer problem, but it's just really, and I say this country, but it's not just the United States. Canada has their issues too. And it's just going to take time. Like I mean, I hope it happens faster, but I am not holding my breath for that. I do see change happening, and it's so great to see other people get into beer. And I think that's how you start kind of changing. I'm thinking of like a ripple effect that'll ripple up, and people will start to realize, like, because a lot of it's about exposure. You have thoughts about how people are, but you're not around those people. So if you do eventually meet someone, because you could think, let's see, what would be an example? Like, some people might not, so let's talk about LGBTQ. They might not feel like, oh, I don't understand it, I don't get it. Like, they're just doing this because it's trendy. But then if you meet someone who has struggled with being out, and you start to have more of a intimate relationship with them in the sense of y'all become friends, and you start listening to their not their troubles, but just their experiences. They start sharing it with you. You will change your mind. I would imagine you would change your mind because you start to see them as a human. And it's stuff like that that I'm hoping will change the tide and get to a point where someone can walk into any space and feel welcomed, and it's not a thing. Like I would love for like my niece and nephew to not ever have to like, well, it's not true because my nephew ran into some issues at school, but I would love for them to not have the experiences that people my age are having now, or people older than me. Like, that would be great. I think things are getting better, but we have a lot of work to do.
There's definitely a lot of work to do. I think that's it. It's all about exposure, right?
Yes.
When you're exposed to something, your prejudices tend to go away because you are no longer ignorant to those those ideas that you previously had. But these things, unfortunately, seem to be taking much longer than we would all like. But
yeah.
Well, I'm pivoting a little bit in terms of focusing a bit more on beer in the city. Maybe can you tell us, Stephanie, about maybe a typical weekend of fun that you would have in and around Atlanta, focusing, highlighting, showcasing craft beer? If you were, say, writing myself an itinerary of where I'd have to go, places I'd have to see in terms of beer and craft beer, maybe could you give us a short description on what you would recommend?
Yes. So I'll just pretend you're coming to visit me, right? Okay. So there's a brewery not too far from my house called Arches Brewing. They specialize in lagers. They have a great lineup. They just recently got a new brewer, I think a few months ago, and he's just been doing phenomenal work. I remember when he came in, I was like, hey, now you have to keep up the good work because I want to make sure I can still come here. But he has been doing a phenomenal job. Lagers are they should be the bread and butter of a city like Atlanta because they're refreshing and light and crisp and all of those things. And on that same vein, Halfway Crooks has amazing lagers as well. Oh my gosh, that's like, they have a beautiful rooftop so we can hang out there if it's not too hot, and drink some lagers. And then we can pop over to Elsewhere because they have beer and food. Their menu is, first of all, the brewery is gorgeous. It's beautiful. And I'm so glad to see, side note, like so glad to see breweries get out of that whole like steel and wood and that's it. Like I'm glad that we're moving past that and we're making, these beautiful spaces for us to drink in. And so they have food. If I'm not mistaken, it's Argentinian, I believe I'm saying the right, food. So you can get like little bites, or you can get a full meal so we can sit out there. They also have a nice little patio, and recently got some new fans. So we could stay nice and cool. I love eating on the patio. My husband, he's so annoyed at me because I'll eat on a patio in July and just be sweating. I'm like, oh, this food is good. And then after that, let's see, where else would I take you? If it's not summertime, we can go to Monday Night Garage because they have some fantastic barrel-aged beers, strong ales. I used to work there a little while ago, and I also got married there. But they have some great barrel-aged program. They have a great sour program. So sours are also a great thing to drink in the summertime. But I would take you there. And then let's see. I want to do one more stop. I'm trying to think of, Three Taverns. Three Taverns is another great place. They have this beer called Night on Ponce, which is one of those, also one that you could just keep in your fridge. It's an IPA, but I think it's like an American IPA. Just really great, solid beers. Like anything off of the menu, you would be happy with at all of these breweries.
Amazing. Would you say that a city like Atlanta has a bit more of an affinity, more of an appreciation for your lager style, your lagers, as opposed to your heavy IPAs or your stouts because of the climate? Do you see that, or is there still a big interest in? Yeah,
we love our NEPAs down here just like everybody else. I have personally decided I don't I don't want to do them anymore. They're so thick. They're so thick and heavy. But no, we have tons of the hazies. We have everything that you would expect to see. All of the beers that are hot, we have them here. Mm-hmm. But I have personally become just such a fan of lagers. Belgian beer. Oh, I mean, my first beer was Allagash White. So, or the first craft beer that really like shouted at me like, you need to drink this all the time was Allagash White. So I love, those are the beers that I love. I used to drink everything, but now as I get older and I guess drinking more beer, I'm become more discerning. And I'm like, no, keep your hazy, give me something light.
Keep your hazy, give me something light. I like that. Well, Stephanie, can you tell us more about good beer hunting? Just give us, for those of us who aren't too familiar, give us the whole rundown of the organization.
Yeah. So I like to think of good beer hunting as the New York Times of beer. They do some really great editorial pieces, have a fantastic podcast, and I have been writing for them. I'm trying to think. I actually have them on my what do you call that? When it's not mood board, dream board. I can't even think of the name of it. The vision board. I had them on my vision board. I was like, oh my gosh, they're so great. They're great writers. If I can write for them, that means I'm a great writer, all that whole thing. Writers are very, oh gosh, what's the word? Sensitive people. So yes, good beer hunting is phenomenal. You go, if you have not been on their website, I recommend you go there. If you're really into beer, you listen to this podcast, I would imagine you're really into beer. And they have fantastic stories, from thoughts on beer to history on beer, all kinds of things that you would want to know. And I also started hosting podcasts for them about sometime last year. And the podcast can range from just interviewing someone like this. We talk, the writers will interview each other, which is a great fun thing. I've done a few of those episodes where, especially if you've written something recently, you can kind of go behind the scenes to hear what the writer has to say about it, which even if I wasn't a writer, I feel like I'd be really into that. Just understanding, I have a thing about understanding what a creative, like what makes them tick. And so if you're like that, then you would definitely love those episodes. Yeah, so that's Good Beer Hunting. I've just been a fan for a long time, and it's such a pleasure to work with them.
Is it national, Stephanie? Do they showcase different areas?
International. Okay. Yes, international. There are our editor-in-chief is based in England. Okay. I want to say London. And then there are a few writers in other parts of the on that side of the world. There are other writers. And we're constantly, Michael Kaiser, who's the founder of Good Beer Hunting, he's constantly looking for other writers from other areas of the world, because beer is an international beverage. It's I believe, the oldest beverage, and alcoholic beverage.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people making beer all around the world, and we are trying to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. Now, what would you say is particularly unique or something to highlight, maybe in the state entirely, in Georgia or Atlanta specifically, that you see as unique? Maybe you did mention, obviously, beer is one of the most, if not the most international drink, definitely in terms of alcoholic beverages. I think it's number 3 in the world: water, then tea, then beer in consumption. Yeah. So what makes beer in Atlanta special? You mentioned something interesting, having a history of prohibition in Atlanta, alcohol in its entirety seen as maybe a vice or something of demonic nature as opposed to anything virtuous. Do you still see those sentiments still exist a little bit, or is the city pretty metropolitan and open to alcohol? What's special about beer in Atlanta? Yeah.
I mean, the community for sure is special. Like I mentioned before, there's a big Black community here. And so when people come from out of town, we recently all gathered for Crafted for Action, which is a hybrid conference that my friend Jim Price put together. And we had some people come from out of town, and they're in places where there's not a lot of Black faces in the breweries or working at the breweries. And they're just like, wow, like there's just such a community here that's not, that they don't find at home. And as far as like the laws, there are still laws on the books. Like I grew up where you could not buy alcohol on Sunday, and we can now, but not until 12:30, because you have to get out of church first before you can get your alcohol. But it's so funny because, and I think about like my granddad was a bootlegger. Like people are always gonna find a way to find alcohol if they want it. But yeah, things are changing. We had a brunch bill that passed a few years ago. It's so hard to keep track of time because of COVID. But we had a brunch bill passed a few years ago that allows people to drink. I can't remember the time. I'm not really a big brunch person. Brunch is huge here in Atlanta too, by the way. I don't know why, but people love brunch here. And the reason why I'm not a brunch person is you have to wait like an hour or so and I don't have time. But yeah, going back to what makes Atlanta special, I would say it's the community more than the laws, more than the types of beers we offer. I think that it's a big community, and still close knit, and people are very welcoming here on all around. The city, that's another one. The city is too busy to hate, and I feel that sometimes. I mean, there's definitely still hate here, but I think there's a lot of love. There's a lot more love in the community than I would say are issues. Of course, issues everywhere, but they're not. I think that we are all just, I don't know, just trying to. There's also a big hustle culture down here too. We're all just trying to make it and not get too hot and have a refreshing beer.
Stephanie, are you a baseball fan?
No, but if I have a team to root for, it will be the Braves. Yeah. Who just they just won their sports here are tough. They're real tough. Not as tough as Cleveland, but they're tough. They're tough.
Yeah, I remember I'm a baseball fan. Growing
Mhm.
up, because in baseball, there's the American League and the National League. My favorite National League team was definitely the Atlanta Braves because
Oh,
I
wow.
liked some of the players on the team when I was growing up. Yeah. So
Did you get any of the championship merch?
no, I didn't. I
I have like
unfortunately.
2 pieces of merch and I don't even think I watched the
Yeah.
championship game. It just appeared in the house. My husband was like, "You want this?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll take it."
Yeah. Gotta
Um,
gotta rep Atlanta pride, right? Yeah.
I mean, exactly.
Yeah.
Atlanta all day. Even though I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, but
Mm,
that's a whole nother
it's a whole nother story.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Right. Well, tell us more about what you're working on as of late, Stephanie, maybe in the
Ooh.
recent past as well as now, what you're working on with Good Beer Hunting as well as on your own. What are some projects you have on the go?
Oh, okay. I'm not used to talking about my projects so publicly, but I have no problem with it. So I'm currently working on a piece that will uh, it's ambitious, but I'm going to narrow it down. I haven't figured how I'm going to narrow it down yet, but I am working on a piece that will look at how beer intersects with Black foodways. And I was actually doing some research on that today. And I'm so excited about it because the other love of my life is food and cooking. And I just have a lot of fond memories of being in the kitchen with my mother, with my grandmother. And it is a form of therapy for me to go in and start slicing up some onions and sauteing them. Um, I love watching the butter melt in a cast iron pan. And so I'm really interested to see where those two meet and kind of dig up some history on how those two things interact because I know uh, it's a thing. Like there's this idea that Black people don't drink beer, which I think is kind of silly. Like everybody drinks beer. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited about that project. It's been one that I've been trying to get to for a while. I recently, I think last week, finished up a piece that was published on Good Bear Hunting. In that article, the Food Waste article will be on Good Bear Hunting. I interviewed Elisa Bowens Macardo, who is the first Black woman to open a brewery in Connecticut. And I told her story. She's a fantastic person. I totally recommend learning more about her. Her energy is just so beautiful. And I like to think of her as like my auntie because she's just sweet.
Mhm.
Um, so that one is a project I recently finished. Let's see, what else am I working on? Some other little things like I'm doing photography for a brewery. I'm hoping to do some reels for a brewery. So if you're a brewery in Atlanta who wants some reels, let me know. And let's see what else. I mentioned the Share is my newsletter. I recently brought that back. I started that in 2020 out of just a loss of connecting with people over beer. And I have a group of friends who I meet up with on Fridays and we go to our watering hole and we drink and we talk about all kinds of things from like Beyonce to politics to like I don't know, whatever you want to talk about is on the table. Like we had a whole long conversation about Jordans one day. And I miss those conversations so much. So I started the Share as a way of having those conversations, even though it wasn't over beer necessarily. But it was a way for me to kind of talk about what was going on. And I mean, gosh, in 2020, there's still so much going on in the world to either be excited about or irate. So I do 2 issues a month. One is about something I'm upset about or something that's on my mind. I recently wrote about my beer journey and how initially, like I mentioned, I would drink everything. I wanted to try everything. it was all about what was new. And now I've settled into this rhythm of, well, let me go ahead and get this 6-pack of Allagash White and make sure it's in my fridge. Let me get some night on Ponce and make sure it's in my fridge, instead of searching out something new. And and then the other newsletter for the month is I will interview someone. Usually it's a Black woman in beer, and I'll tell her story, share her story. But I've also started, or I will start writing about people in food, and also in the cocktail world, because I think there's so much similarities between the three, and they're all things that I've become really passionate about. So that's my way of sharing. So that's, I brought that back last month, actually. I took a little bit of a break, and I'm really excited to be back. Let's see what else. I will be doing a podcast episode. I haven't actually contacted her, but I'm doing a podcast episode. There is an article on Good Bear Hunting about how HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, have been instrumental in bringing Black people into the craft beer scene, which is something that I wouldn't have made that connection, but it's there. And so I will be interviewing the author of that piece to talk to her. Like I mentioned, writers talking to writers, to learn what she kind of left on the Word doc, because there's some things that, don't make it in, or when you interview someone, there are things that they're great, like information, but they might not fit into the story you're telling. So it's always great to go behind the scenes and see what their thought process, what did they really want to put in, but it didn't really fit, like those kinds of things. As I mentioned, I love those kinds of things. So keep an eye out for that. And I think that's it. I'm a very busy woman, but I think those are the things that are interesting. There's some stuff that's just every day.
On the go. Yeah. Stephanie,
Yeah.
when are you writing your book?
Oh man.
I feel like it's coming. I feel like unless you've already, have you written a book, Stephanie? I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I haven't. So I'm one of those writers who was like, I'm not gonna write a book. Like I'm not, like I don't necessarily care to, but I have an idea for one. It's super ambitious. It's super ambitious, and I'm not ready to share.
Okay. All right.
But yeah, you might see a book from me one day. Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll look out for it.
Yeah.
Does it have something to do with beer or food?
Yes, it definitely has something to do with beer, and it's basically the work that, it's reflective of the work that I do now. I'll say that.
Okay, that's a good hint. Good hint. Stephanie, do you have any history of actually brewing beer or doing any experimentation in brewing at all?
I've done some home brewing. It's funny, my husband started, when I talked about it was his hobby. So he was like, I want to brew beer. And I was like, okay, baby, I'll support you. My kitchen was such a mess, I tell you that. And so I helped him with that. And then he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. And then I was like, oh, we have all this equipment, not too much, but we have enough equipment to fill up a little closet. And I was like, oh, I'll start brewing. And then I started doing it, and I was like, oh, this is a lot. Like, mad props to brewers. It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's funny, I talked to a brewer once, and she was like, I had asked her, because the assumption is home brewers turn into professional brewers, but that's not always the case. I've talked to actually a few people who have just like, they started working in a brewery, and then all of a sudden they started brewing. And she was just like, home brewing just seems so archaic. And I was like, yeah, when I started home brewing myself, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, this is a lot. So the answer is like, no, yes. I've done a little bit. I've gone down to Arches a few times and I've brewed with them. I know enough, but I don't know. It's not something that I am super passionate about. I'm super passionate about drinking the beer, not making it.
It's far more appealing to me as well.
It's the easier route.
Yeah, of course. Well, I know you focus some of your efforts and writings on beer pairings.
Mm-hmm.
What's your interest in that particularly? Maybe you could touch on specific culinary dishes that one can find in Atlanta that pair well with particular beers in Atlanta. What's your interest with beer pairings and your experience with it?
So I was actually I'm looking for the book because I usually it's near me, but it's Garrett Oliver's. I think it's called The Brewer's Table. Oh gosh, I'm gonna be mad if I get that wrong because I look at it like every week. But I remember I was reading his book in the car. Yes, I can read in the car. I know some people get sick. I was reading his book in the car on the way down to Savannah. And if you've ever driven from Atlanta to Savannah, there's this road called 16 that is incredibly boring. So I was reading this book to pass time. And he said in there, he was like, wine people think they have it when it comes to food pairings, but beer is a superior option. And from that sentence, I was like, oh, bet. I'm about to explore this whole world. And I remember talking to a woman there's a wonderful chain of bottle shops here called Hop City. And there was a woman who was working in there and I admired her because I was like, oh, I'm making sweet potato pie. And she was like, what should I was like, what should I pair with this? And she was like walking around the aisles and just rattling off stuff. And I'm like, wow, you're doing this off the top of your head. This is amazing. And I was like, how do I get as good as you? And she's like, just keep doing it. Like, keep eating stuff, keep drinking beer. And that's what I've been doing. I've been sharing that journey as I go. I'm actually, this is something else I'm working on. I am working on a wheat beer pairing series that I'm dropping next week. I'm still working on creating the content. It's part of what I was doing today. And I will feature Hefeweizen, just a American wheat and a wheat beer. And so I'll have different foods that to pair with those 3 beers. And I'm hoping to do this like seasonally. We'll see. Mm-hmm. And I love food. I love beer. Like, why not put them together? That's my thing. I love writing. I love beer. Put them together. I think it makes life easier. But I will say my favorite pairing. I want to make sure I get this beer right. So let me just. It's an Allagash beer. Mm-hmm. I think it's the. Oh gosh. Oh, barrel and bean. That's what it is. Okay. You get barrel and bean and some sweet potato pie. Chef's kiss.
Really?
It's the best pair. I talk about it all the time. It is the best pairing of food and beer that I've had. For anyone who wants to know more about food and beer pairings, there is a book by Julia Hertz. I believe that's her last name. She works for the Brewers Association. Mm-hmm. And she wrote a book with another woman whose name I am missing, and I do not know the name of the book. Let me look it up. But they in their book have this wonderful way of judging pairings, and I absolutely love it.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And so the book is called Beer Pairing, the essential guide with the pairing pros. And so the way to describe it is you can pair 2 food and beer together, and it could be neutral. It could be like the food and beer wasn't necessarily changed. Like there wasn't any difference in the flavors when you put the two together. So that's like a 0. Or it could be like an awful disaster. So that's like a -1. And then you can have an extreme, exquisite, like sweet potato pie and barrel and bean situation. And that's like, I think it might go up to 2. So let's say 2. And when I found out about that, I was like, oh, this is perfect. So every time I'm like mentally grading these pairings. A lot of pairings kind of end in that 0. I mean, I'm trying to think of was there? Yeah, there is an Atlanta Foods hot wings, lemon pepper, wet. I don't know how to describe that to y'all. They're lemon pepper wings, but they're just like they're wet. And let's see, I'm trying to think. I know this, I've done this, but I can't think of what beer I paired with them. I want to say something light and crisp, like a lager.
That's what I would think would go well. Yeah, but
which is perfect because you have your nice hot wings, crispy, flavorful.
Now back, Stephanie, to the sweet potato pie. Who's making the sweet potato? Is that something you're making it?
I'm making a sweet potato pie. I mean, you can also make it. Like whoever make a sweet potato pie. I would not say buy it because I don't think it's going to be good.
Right. See, I feel like you have a master's recipe for the sweet potato pie that I probably wouldn't be able to create, but
no. My sweet potato pie recipe is from Joy the baker. It's her dad's sweet potato pie recipe. And I don't tell my mom because she would be upset if I'm not making her recipe, but Joy's is just a little bit better. I'm sorry.
I'm sure mom's is good too.
Oh no, hers is great. Yeah, but Joy makes her own. I like to go the hard route when it comes to cooking. Make my own pie, the crust.
Wow.
I don't make my own bread. I have, but I wouldn't make it for like a sandwich. But I love making my own dough. So mom doesn't. Mom had 3 kids, so I understand why she didn't. So it's fine. But yeah, I would not say go to the store and buy the pie unless you buy it from Whole Foods. Their pie was actually pretty good, but anywhere else, no, not gonna have that same taste.
Boy, I really need to. I'm so jealous right now. I want to go to Atlanta right now and try these wonderful culinary dishes and these beers and enjoy the 90-degree heat and the humidity and everything. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to do that, but you can.
It gets pretty cold, Stephanie, up in Canada. It's nice.
I mean, are you ready for oppressive humidity and like 100? It felt like 105 degrees today.
Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
That's high.
That's all right. We have air conditioning too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hot here in the summer, but not that.
No, I wouldn't imagine not.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, we're getting close to our hour mark. I want to be respectful of your time, of course, but I do want to ask, I asked this question quite a bit to different guests, kind of poking at everyone to get their predictions on what things will be like in their particular area. If you had to predict or guess, or if you have any insight, where do you think craft beer, and maybe you could touch on craft beer and food as well, it's up to you, but craft beer in Atlanta, I think you've highlighted why the scene in the city has some uniqueness to it, particularly with other cities in the United States. But if you had to maybe give a 5-year timeline on the differences that will come to be within beer, maybe in Atlanta, maybe in 2027, something like that. What do you think the city will be like in terms of craft beer in 5 years?
Well, I hope that there are more brick and mortar Black owned breweries here. So we have several breweries in planning, but we actually just got our first brick and mortar, I want to say in 2021. We have 2 now in the person who opened the first one, they're opening up a second location. So I guess you can kind of treat that as 3, which is really disappointing for a city that not only has a huge Black community, but also has Black businesses thrive here. And that just shows you like a lot of the hurdles that you have to kind of go through to open up a brewery. It's not easy. And not only is it a huge financial, let's say contributions, not the right word.
Undertaking, maybe.
Yes, there we go. It's just there are a lot of laws and things that you have to deal with. It's a huge thing to open one. So if you know someone has opened one, like super congratulate them, because it's not easy. I had the pleasure of even opening up Monday nights, I think 3rd location, and the days are long and it's tough work. So even when you get the building, it's, so back to what I would like to see. So I would love to see a lot of these breweries in planning actually open up. That would be phenomenal. I would really like to see, I'm sorry, all you hazy lovers, for that trend to just go away. I want it to go away like the Black IPA, which I actually really liked. But I hope it just, I want us to look back and be like, man, remember we were like crazy about hazies, and like, is a past tense thing. And that's more of a around the world thing, not specific to Georgia. I just had to put that out there. I'm a hazy hater. I'm just gonna say it. Let's see, what else would I like to see? I'm already seeing more Black and brown faces in tap rooms. I would love to see more of that, even more. I would love to see more of that, more people working in the breweries who are from the BIPOC community. That would be amazing. Let's see, what else would I want? Oh, and then back again to like breweries getting out of this like wood and steel, and that's it. I'm starting to see, I'm also a lover of plants. If you see you see the plants on my wall.
Yeah.
And I have I've seen breweries make an attempt to soften up that really, it feels like very masculine energy, and they're bringing the plants in to kind of add some softness to this place. And I would love to see more aesthetically pleasing tap rooms. Those are the things that I wish to see, and I feel are currently happening. Things are headed that way.
Wonderful. I think your predictions will hopefully all come true.
I think so.
Stephanie, I really appreciate you speaking with me. I think you're a wonderful, beautiful storyteller, and it definitely comes out in just everything you talk about. You're a very passionate and very positive person. It's been lovely speaking with you for an hour.
Yeah, same here.
I will definitely let you know the next time I'm in Atlanta, hopefully sooner rather than later. Maybe you can give me a little beer tour of the city.
That would be great. It'd be great if you come in like May, because it's not as hot.
Not so crazy hot. All right, wonderful. Stephanie Grant, thank you very much, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Same here.
Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.